The House will come to order. Announcement by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. A message from the Senate has been received requesting concurrence by the House to amendments adopted by the Senate to the following House files. House File number 1243 and House File number 3249.
Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Peppin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Monday, May 14th, 2018, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File numbers 3421, 3422, and 3423. Senate File numbers 3638 and 3245. House File numbers 4404, 3221, 3380, 3799, 4133, 4425, 3666, 3567, and 3759. Senate File number 3461, House File number 3790, Senate File number 3000, and House File number 3660. Peppin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Tuesday, May 15th, 2018, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. Senate File numbers 2863, 3673, 2809, 3367, 2675, 2685, 3310, 3143, 2991, 3569, 2683, 3102, and 3480, and House File numbers 3873.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2762. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2762, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to human services, the first engrossment.
Recognize the author of the bill from Polk, Representative Kiel, to explain her bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 2762 was brought to me by Episcopal Church Home. The bill increases the skilled nursing facility property rate for Episcopal Home through the existing moratorium exemption appropriation. A number of years ago, Episcopal Homes completed renovations to better serve the elders in the St. Paul Midway area. Unfortunately, this renovation put them at the property rate maximum. Having reached the maximum, and with the current rules, the state property rate system does not fully recognize the cost and debt associated with maintaining and improving an older building. This makes it difficult for Episcopal Homes to make the necessary improvements to best serve its clients and the broader community. This actually resides in Representative Murphy's district, and I was pleased to, as the aging chair in the subcommittee, was asked to carry this. I guess that would be the information. If there's any questions, I stand for questions. Thank you.
There being no amendments, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 2762.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. The residents of Episcopal Homes would be grateful for your support.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Sandra. Nope, we got it. Members, please vote. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. Allen votes aye. There being 123 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2849. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2849, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health.
Call upon the author of the bill from Anoka, Representative Whelan, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the bill. This bill is a very simple addition to the Women's Right to Know statute. It simply adds a provision that says if a woman is going to have an ultrasound done prior to an abortion, that the physician or physician's agent performing that ultrasound shall orally inform the woman of her opportunity to view her active image ultrasound if she chooses to. It could be a simple question, would you like to see your ultrasound? And then the patient can say yes or no, pending her preference. Notably, 26 states have similar laws, although I will say in committee there was some confusion on it, so I want to be very, very clear. We are not requiring that an ultrasound be performed, simply saying that if an ultrasound is being performed, then the woman must be informed that she can view her ultrasound as it's being done if she chooses to. This is about empowering women with information so they can make the decision that they feel is best for them and their bodies. It really is about empowering and informing. And members, it's interesting, in our own rules and Masons, it says that we as members of the legislature are entitled to all the information available to us before we vote on bills. How much more so should we ensure that a woman has all the information available to her before she makes a potentially life-altering decision? As a woman and as a legislator, I think more information is better. And so with this bill, that's what we would be doing. The intent of the bill is not actually to change anybody's mind, but rather to give them the information so they can make up their own mind. I personally want to empower women, as I think they're strong enough, mentally, emotionally. They are capable of being asked a question, would you like to see your own ultrasound? And then deciding for themselves if they want to view it. There's a lot of empirical data that shows this is actually very good for women, and women want this. I'll just note one study. There was a study that analyzed over 15,000 visits by women to a clinic in California and found that among the small subset of women with low to medium decision certainty, when they're asked if they want to view their ultrasound and they do view it, a large number, or of that small subset, more do decide to continue to pregnancy than not. And so, while it doesn't affect the decision of every woman, most women, A, appreciate the question being asked, and B, if they are undecided, it can be very helpful to them. And I think personally that women like being asked the question because it's a procedure that's being done on their body. They want to be empowered with the decision of whether or not to view a procedure being done on their own body. And finally, members, I just would like to note that we do know while some women don't regret their abortions, some do regret their abortions. And we want to make sure at the beginning, at the outset, women have as much information as possible before they make this decision so that they can make the best decision for themselves and potentially avoid regretting that decision. The information we're offering to women in this bill is a picture, and some women would really appreciate that picture. So members, again, I would just ask for your support. This bill is about empowering women and giving them that opportunity to view their own ultrasound image. If you are pro-women and for information and choice, I would ask for your support. And Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Members, there are amendments at the desk. Representative Halverson offers the following amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Halverson moves to amend Senate File number 2849 as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
And Representative Halverson, there's an amendment to the amendment that you've authored. Do you wish to offer that at this time as well? Representative Halverson offers the following amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report it.
Halverson moves to amend her amendment to Senate File number 2849 as follows. The amendment to the amendment is coded A3.
Call upon the author of the amendment to the amendment from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I know that some members are still getting the amendments, so the pages are working fast and furiously to get this information out. I think that it's incredibly important that the state of Minnesota and the Minnesota State Legislature do not get involved in practicing medicine, and that we do not get involved in telling physicians what to do and how to do it, what they do with patients. Our physicians are board certified through the state of Minnesota. They are overseen by the Board of Medical Practice, and their relationships with their patient are unique and personal, as everybody's health is. And so my amendment and the amendment to the amendment seek to empower physicians to make sure that physicians are only having to give information that they deem medically accurate. The habit of the legislature in past years has been to dictate what physicians say to their patients. We know that physicians in Minnesota are working hard on behalf of their patients, and to dictate what they say to patients as legislators, not a single medical doctor in this chamber, no less, is incredibly concerning. And so I ask that this chamber vote yes, vote for truth, vote for the empowerment of physicians in Minnesota, and vote yes so that our physicians are never having to make a choice over what the legislature tells them to do versus what their professional medical practice tells them to do. And I will make note, there should be coming around letters from both the MMA and ACOG to support my amendment and to oppose the underlying bill.
Member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would urge a no vote on this. This is an unnecessary amendment. The women's right to know already requires information to be medically accurate. In fact, if you look in statute 145.4243, the materials shall be objective, non-judgmental, and designed to convey only accurate scientific information. So, contrary to what some have been told, the women's right to know has no script. It addresses topics of information that must be provided to women, such as the risks and the alternatives, but it allows the physician discretion on how to discuss the topics. And further, the language on 1.6 to 1.9 basically guts the women's right to know of all of the subjective, and it makes it subjective to the whims of the physician. If the abortionist decides that he or she doesn't think it's appropriate to provide women with complete information required by law, then they wouldn't have to under this language. So members, I would encourage a no vote on both amendments and the amendment to the amendment.
Member from Anoka, Representative Whelan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would echo Representative Scott's statements that this amendment is unnecessary. Women's right to know already in statute requires information to be medically accurate. Of course, we want women to have medically accurate information, and our law requires that. So rather than allow this to be interpreted subjectively, we think objectively as it is what should stand. And so, members, I would ask you to vote no on the amendment to the amendment.
Member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I find it ironic that we're talking about the unnecessariness of my amendment. What we're discussing today is interfering with the doctor-patient relationship. The Minnesota State Legislature dictating to physicians how to practice medicine in the state of Minnesota. And I heard somebody saying it, that my amendment would be subject to the whim of the physician. Board-certified physicians in Minnesota are well-trained professionals. In fact, we have conversations all the time when we talk about licensing, when we talk about oversight of the Board of Medical Practice. The standards that Minnesota practitioners are put to when it comes to licensing in the state of Minnesota, they're quite high, and they're higher than other states in many cases. And so the thought that physicians are practicing on a whim when it comes to women's health it's insulting. The Women's Right to Know Act, when it was put into statute back in 2008, many people thought that was unnecessary. The state of Minnesota has a very robust Patient's Bill of Rights. We have a very robust Patient's Bill of Rights where patients are in charge of their health care, where patients have an expectation and are asked to hold their physician to an expectation, a high level of informed consent, regardless of the procedure. But here we are again, with just days left in the session, a lot of work to do, and we're talking about one specific medical procedure and interfering with one specific relationship between a doctor and a patient. And that's with regard to a patient who is seeking an abortion. And by having that conversation, what the Minnesota legislature is saying is that women do not know their minds, and women do not know their hearts, and that women do not know their bodies. And that none of that is true. The fact is most women who seek an abortion have already become a parent. Most women who are seeking an abortion are already a parent. Women understand their bodies. Most women who are seeking an abortion have had the opportunity to connect with others in their lives, their physician, perhaps their partners, perhaps their parents, perhaps their clergy member, and they go into their decision-making process thoughtfully, and I would say reverently. And to say otherwise discounts the decision-making abilities of women in Minnesota and around the state. And so here we are again talking about one specific procedure, interfering specifically with something that women are seeking, assuming that physicians are not doing their job, not across the board. I hear a lot of support for physicians when we're in committee talking about training and licensure and practice, except when it comes to one procedure, which is one of the safest medical procedures that there is. And a procedure that women go into with knowledge and with research and with understanding. And so it is absolutely important to vote yes on my amendment to the amendment in order to say, we Minnesota are going to stand up for honesty, we Minnesota are going to stand up for the patient, and we Minnesota are going to say we trust women and we trust physicians. Vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the A3 amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment to the amendment is not adopted. Members, we're on the A2 underlying amendment from Representative Halverson. Member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry that that amendment did not go on, as we're getting information here from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. These are the physicians who are charged with the care of women in the state of Minnesota, and they're opposed to this bill. And so I ask for a roll call on the A2 amendment.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask you to vote yes. I ask you to vote for truth. And I ask you to vote in favor of this amendment.
Discussion on the A2 amendment. Member from Anoka, Representative Whelan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Halverson, for the conversation here. I just want to make a few points. In any profession, there is disagreement, and so we know that one physician might think it's appropriate or reasonable for me to ask this woman, would you like to see your ultrasound? Another physician might say, no, it's not. And so personally, I don't want women in my district or in this state to wonder, am I going to show that I'm emotionally capable enough to this physician to be asked this question? I think women are emotionally strong and they're capable, and they all should be asked the same question. There's no reason to not ask this question. If we add this language, which says that the physician can decide whether or not they think it's appropriate, it becomes entirely subjective. Furthermore, just a clarifying point, the Women's Right to Know was passed in 2003, not 2008. The patient's Bill of Rights, actually, interestingly enough, does not apply to women seeking an abortion in an abortion clinic. By the definition, I checked that with our nonpartisan counsel. So the Women's Right to Know is doubly important because this is the only statute that ensures women have the information and the rights available to them to get the information they need on this procedure. Also, people, I think it's important to remember that when women are seeking an abortion, this is not like going to their a general practitioner. This is a doctor they don't see probably ever otherwise. It's hard to establish that trust and that working relationship. And so I think it is important to note that this is unique. This is a different sort of procedure. They may not see this doctor ever again. And we also know that we don't license and regulate abortion clinics in the state, and so it is different. And I think it's important to note that there are reasons we have different statutes governing this. So members, with that, I do want to note that in the interim time, you also had passed out to you testimony from 2 women who had an abortion and later on went to regret that decision and really believe firmly that if they would have had the opportunity to view their ultrasound, they may have made a different decision. And they want that decision for all the women in the state of Minnesota. So if you have not read that testimony, I would highly encourage you to read it. And for these reasons, members, I would just remind you again, in our current statute, already we require medically accurate information. The amendment is unnecessary. Please vote no.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, when I was first elected, a medical professional from the University of Minnesota said, I have one piece of advice for you and a real request. He said he would be glad to be a resource to me on any health issue, and that things he didn't know, he would be glad to find me resources. But he said, the one thing I will ask you to do is don't practice medicine. And his example was a provision that was put into statute requiring availability of a particular cancer treatment, a woman's related cancer treatment, that had become out of date and the research had shown was not the best route to go. But we had endorsed it in statute, and so that was given stronger weight by some people than perhaps the medical research today would give it in any way. And he said, you will learn a lot about law, but you can never know what I know from going through all of my medical training and staying up to date on continuing education. And we need to honor that kind of request and assume that our licensed medical practitioners will do what is appropriate and what is evidence-based, and will have an honest discussion with their patient. They're required to for informed consent on every procedure. And I'm tired of seeing women's health being treated differently than any other health procedure in law, and I think we ought to respect the training of those physicians and not put these kind of provisions into state law.
Member from Dakota, Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers. Members, I think it would be very helpful for us to just remember that abortion is a medical procedure that women have for a myriad of reasons. A myriad of reasons. It is not something that women go into willy-nilly, maybe regret later. It is a medical procedure that is sometimes part of pregnancy care. To suggest that doctors do not have the professional judgment to know when and how often and what to say with their patients, and that we somehow know better, we know all of the reasons why women have abortions, and therefore this question should be asked every single time, undermines the fact that every single patient, every single Minnesotan who has any relationship with their doctor at any point in time is unlike any other Minnesotan, because we are all different people. We all have different medical needs and histories. Medical procedures that are the same from person to person are often for different reasons. So I hope that we vote for Representative Halverson's amendment here, because the professional judgment of the doctors often includes the understanding of their patient. Some women who have abortions do have them from doctors that they've had for a long time, that they know, that they have a relationship with. So let's not ascribe one procedure and say that all women have this procedure for the same reason. Let's let doctors do their job. Let's stay out of the exam rooms. And let's vote yes on Representative Halverson's amendment. Thank you.
Member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Mr. Speaker and members, I heard a member, Representative Whelan, say a few moments ago that if a physician gets to decide what the physician is telling the patient, that is entirely subjective. And that somehow that if we say in law that the physician gets to decide what is medically accurate and appropriate for the patient and use their professional judgment, that's not good enough. That somehow legislators are in a better position to know in every single case, with every single patient, what the physician should tell that patient. I find that really appalling. What are we talking about here? This A2 amendment is saying that nothing here should be construed to require a licensed or registered healthcare provider or person working under their authority to give a patient information that is not medically accurate and appropriate for the patient within that healthcare provider's reasonable professional judgment. I don't know how anybody can oppose that. I really don't. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, I don't see how you can oppose this amendment. Because this amendment is just saying that healthcare providers have to be allowed to use their professional judgment with a patient. That's what they're licensed to do. Now, I had another amendment that I have pulled, members, that was kind of not a serious amendment, but here's what it said. It was an amendment that was going to suggest that in every case that woman's legislator should also be in the room. Well, obviously that's not a serious amendment. I did pull the amendment. But the point is there, that what members are doing is inserting themselves between the doctor and the patient. Our medical community in this state is very, very good. And for those who aren't good, we have procedures and we have a board of medical practice and we have a complaint process. And to say that this amendment is somehow wrong and that that if a physician gets to decide what they tell a patient, that's entirely subjective. Wow. Wow. So when you go in for surgery on your appendix, whatever that physician is telling you, that's just subjective. You know, they're just making it up on the fly. I think that's an insult to our medical community. Every member on this floor should be voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Discussion. Further discussion. Member from Anoka, Representative Whelan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to respond to a few of the points that were made, the amendment states that information that is not medically accurate and appropriate for the patient and the healthcare provider's reasonable professional judgment. So both those phrases, appropriate and reasonable, are subjective. And remember what the underlying bill is saying, members. We're saying that the physician shall offer to a female the question, would you like to see your own ultrasound image? That is objective. We're going to ask all women the same question. And so I think it's insulting to women to say, no, we don't think that you should be asked that question. We think that some of you may be sure, but not all of you. And I think as women, we should be advocating for women to say, we want to empower you so you can make the decision about your body, not anybody else. At the end of the day, the doctor, your significant others, they all can give you the advice, and that's great, but you are the one that's going to make the decision. We need to put the power back in women's hands. Also, members, I really think that it's important to note that while a lot of women may end up changing their mind, not all of them will, and there are many studies that show even for women that go on to have an abortion, they still appreciate being asked the question. I'm just going to reference one of the studies done in the United Kingdom, which found that of the women who saw their ultrasound scan, 24% said they would have liked to see it to aid their decision-making as a right, or out of curiosity. And given the choice, a larger number of women would have liked to see their scan than actually ask. And women request to see their ultrasound images for their own individual reasons, which should be respected. So there are many reasons women may want to or may not want to view their ultrasound, but that decision should be in their hands. And so for that reason, I would ask you to vote no on the amendment.
The author of the amendment from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, everybody, for the discussion. Feels like it's coming down onto two sides. One, are the physicians of Minnesota, the board-certified, medically trained physicians of Minnesota, incapable of practicing medicine? So incapable that they need the state of Minnesota to dictate to them. And to say that this amendment is in any way creating subjectivity in medical practice it's inaccurate. And what we want is for everybody to have access to the accurate information, to medically appropriate information. And if the physician is using their reasonable, professional medical judgment, we should expect nothing less. If the legislature is using our regional professional judgment to dictate health care in Minnesota, we should be terrified as patients in Minnesota. It is not the job of this body to practice medicine. It is not the job of this body to dictate what patients and doctors discuss in the privacy of their office visit. If it's a general practitioner or if it's a specialist that you see once or twice, it is not the job of this body to interfere in that relationship. And so, if we want to talk about empowering patients, we have to empower patients to get the medically accurate information that they deserve from the professionals who practice medicine. And I'll tell you, any day of the week, nobody is going to call me up and ask me for my opinion on their healthcare decisions. Nor should they. That's not my job as a state legislator. They should call their physician, who should use their reasonable professional judgment in advising them in their care. Please vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 48 ayes and 79 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments to the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2849.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. When we heard this bill in committee, I asked what this bill does to prevent abortions, and the answer is nothing. It does nothing to prevent abortions. And while I'm out door knocking and talking to my constituents, they send us here and expect us to solve problems. This bill does not solve a problem. If we're really serious about preventing abortions, which I think we all are, I hope we all are, then we should be doing what we can to stop unintended pregnancies. Making long-term reversible contraception available to everyone would be the right way to go ahead and stop abortions. Thank you.
Member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, so the basic question before us is who should decide how our physicians practice medicine and interact with us, interact with women in this bill, but really it establishes interacting with patients. Who should decide down to the level of the exact questions that physicians should ask and the wording they should use? Who's in the exam room? Is it our physician or is it the government? Representative Whelan, my colleague, said that in any profession there is disagreement, and of course that's exactly the point. The Minnesota Medical Association, our state's obstetricians and gynecologists are opposed to this. They recognize that the practice of medicine is in fact a practice exercised by professionals, exercising their professional judgment. Representative Whelan pointed out that every patient is unique. That's exactly the point. And what's critical, as this letter you have from our state's physicians says, what's critical is that medical decisions be made in a close, trusting partnership between a physician and a fully informed patient. By picking out a specific medical procedure, dictating exactly how the physician has to perform that procedure, according to our state's physicians, and I'm inclined to listen to our state's physicians when it comes to the practice of medicine, they are saying that that disrupts that close, trusting bond. We don't have this for other procedures, don't even have this for the many other kinds of ultrasounds. And why this procedure? And of course we know why, because of the nature of this, because of the controversy, and I respect that and respect the views of those who feel that way, but of course we also need to respect, the individual women who are making their own healthcare choices in consultation with their doctors. It is so disappointing to me, and such a sign, I think, and I want to make sure members of the public are aware of this, that amendments that simply required that information be medically accurate and appropriate in the provider's reasonable professional judgment, those were voted down. That is a sign as to what is really going on here. This is not about the professional practice of medicine. This is not about a provider's reasonable professional judgment. This is not about medical accuracy or what's appropriate for the individual patient. This is saying to our state's physicians, we, the government, we legislators, know more than you do about the practice of medicine. And I am inclined to listen to our state's physicians and to the individual women who are their patients, and will vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy E.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members, Representative Whelan, you are speaking today about women and empowerment and information. And as a healthcare provider, someone who's taking care of people, I want to let you know that it is up to me, and I'm required by my license to make sure that the person in my care is fully informed. And that is a mutual relationship. And whether I see somebody once in a hospital visit, and I care for them for one evening as a nurse, which I have done, or if it's somebody who comes back to a hospital over and over again, or to a clinic and establishes a long-term relationship with a patient, it is still our responsibility as providers to establish a relationship of mutual trust and consent. Part of my job as a provider is to make sure that the person in my care understands what it is that's being discussed. And nurses are excellent in that, and so are doctors, licensed providers. That's our professional obligation. And I, as a provider, and the providers, the doctors and nurses in Minnesota, recognize the person in our care is autonomous and has their judgment and their decision-making. And when we provide care, it is the individual, the patient in our care, who makes the final decisions. And when we, as non-providers here, insert ourselves into that relationship, instead of empowering women, it creates, in many cases, it can create a coercive relationship between the provider and the patient. And we shouldn't insert ourselves there because we, most of us, are not healthcare providers. This is where we have to trust the women who are seeking care and the providers who are trained and licensed to do that work. And this proposal, as well-intentioned as you may be, does not achieve that goal, and that is why I will vote no and urge members to do the same.
Member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to point out the irony of the other side of the aisle pointing to this as a right to know bill at the same time that we've had opposition against teenagers having the right to know how their bodies work. So if we're really serious about women being fully informed about their medical decisions, then we should also be doing that work when it comes to sex education and making sure that our young people understand how their bodies work and we're not withholding information from them, because that's a more important right to know than being able to see an ultrasound that they already have a right to see. So just wanted to point out that irony and encourage folks to vote no.
Member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Whelan, thank you for bringing forward this bill. You know, these bills are very difficult for the bodies on both sides because they get very emotional and we are very invested in our beliefs, and many of us believe that life begins at conception. Others believe that it's just a clump of cells and that that life can be just exterminated because it may not fit in the woman's life. But members, I've heard a couple of interesting things, that abortion is health care. Well, I would ask you, and I want you to think about this, that if abortion is truly health care, if it's truly health care, then why does the baby die? Abortion is not health care, and it certainly is not pregnancy care.
Member from Dakota, Representative May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, abortion is part of pregnancy care, and I'll tell you one story as to why. I have a dear friend. She got pregnant at 40. Her and her husband were really excited, and the baby died. And this is one of the reasons this bill is so harmful. It's just one example. One person I know who had an abortion because she had to have an abortion because the baby died. And so what this bill would have meant is that after they found out that her baby had died in utero, when she went in for the procedure to have the abortion, her physician would have to ask her again, do you want to see the ultrasound? Why would we dictate that conversation? Abortion is part of pregnancy care. Women have abortions for a myriad of reasons. Minnesotans have healthcare procedures for a myriad of reasons. We do not dictate what the conversation between a doctor and a patient looks like because we are not doctors, because the medical situation of every single Minnesotan is unique every single time. And we cannot legislate how doctors talk to their patients because it will be different every single time. And that is why this bill is not helpful. And I don't believe it is brought with good faith because the goal isn't to empower women, it's ultimately to make abortion out of reach and inaccessible to women in Minnesota. That is unacceptable. Whether you agree with abortion or not is irrelevant. This is not a moral issue. This is a medical procedure that some women have. That is it. Our beliefs about that procedure do not get dictated into law, just like other beliefs about medical procedures that other Minnesotans have do not get dictated into law. Members, I urge you to vote no on this bill, not because I want you to change your beliefs, but because I want you to understand that this is a medical procedure and we are harming women and their ability to have health care with their doctors by trying to legislate the conversations that they have about their medical procedure. So please vote no on this bill.
Further discussion. Member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to ask, I wonder if Representative Whelan would yield to a question.
She will. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Whelan, I believe that when this bill was heard in the Health and Human Services, I think it was the Reform Committee, that you said something about that this was not, there was no enforcement mechanism in the bill, so that this was not about targeting physicians for, about targeting physicians. And I would like to ask you, what happens if a physician doesn't do this in some instance?
The member from Anoka, Representative Whelan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Liebling, for the question. Interestingly enough, I did re-listen to the committee hearing, and I didn't say there was no enforcement mechanism. To be clear, at the time, I wasn't quite sure, and so our nonpartisan staff did clarify for us that in the Women's Right to Know statute currently, if there is a violation, then we have a mechanism that would allow a woman who was not provided with the information in Women's Right to Know the opportunity to bring an action. And so the same mechanism of enforcement would apply here.
Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Whelan, for that answer. So, members, what I think this bill is really about is scaring doctors and making it harder for them to provide abortion care to women. And that's because what happens if under this section, it just requires that the physician orally inform the patient of the opportunity to view or decline to view the ultrasound image. So what does that mean? It means that at their peril, physicians better write it down that they did this, and if they fail to do that, it's a he said, she said, or a she said, whichever gender that physician happens to be. And so I think that what this does is just give another way that the forces, the people who don't like women to have the right to choose abortion can go after doctors. That's what I view this as. Now, there are some really ironic things that were said. My colleagues have talked about some of them, but I noted that when Representative Whelan first talked about this bill, she said two things that are really in contradiction. She said the purpose of the bill is not to get women to change their minds about having an abortion. But then she talked somewhat at length about how many decide to continue the pregnancy after they see this. So is it or isn't it? This bill has, I think, a twofold purpose. One is to try to prevent more abortions, okay, but the other is to go after doctors. That is very concerning to me. Because there really is a presumption in this bill that physicians are not concerned about the welfare of their patients. That is the presumption under which this bill is coming forward, and that they need to be micromanaged. And if we, the legislature, don't micromanage them, they will not do the right thing. Essentially, it's telling them what to say at their peril, that they risk being sued, maybe being punished with their licensure if they don't say this very particular thing in every single case. I think that is very, very problematic. I also want to mention Representative Whelan has sent us a couple of letters here that she's bringing forward as support for a position. I'm looking at these letters. They are one is from an abortion that took place in 1998, and the other is from 1990. So if at one time this bill would have made any difference, that time is not now, because as we've been discussing here on the floor, there's already a lot in statute that has to be told to a woman, but way before she ever gets to the point of actually having an abortion. So I think this bill, although it comes to us kind of under the veneer of being just entirely benign, I think it's far from benign. I think this is a bill that's attacking doctors, and it is also saying that women, even after they've gotten all this information ahead of time, that they still can be dissuaded from something they've decided. And finally, members, before I sit down, I want to respond to something that Representative Franson said. You know, Representative Franson, it always is interesting to me when people who are against abortion characterize why those of us who support abortion rights do. And maybe this is a marker of how people don't listen on this issue. But it's not because of any belief of mine that I support abortion rights. It's because I don't believe that government should tell women what they should believe. That's the point. So all of you who talk about how you're against big government, you don't want government to make people's decisions, except when it comes to the most intimate decision a person will probably ever make, and one of the most difficult. We've had this discussion over and over again on this floor, but You know, there are a lot of reasons why women do choose abortion, and Representative Mayquade talked about this some. The reasons are as individual as the women are. And, you know, for some women it may not be that hard a decision, but for others it can be an excruciating decision. And somebody very close to me had to make a very excruciating decision at one time in her life. And so I'm somewhat familiar with how hard that can be. And the point is that all the members sitting here on the floor, like it or not, you are government. You are government. And when you tell women, when you try to influence them in their most intimate decisions, in the things that they should be talking about with their doctors, with the people who love them and who they love, maybe with their clergy, but you want to insert yourself into that decision. And you want to make it harder for doctors to carry out their wishes, and you want to make it harder and more embarrassing and more, you want to shame women into not making that decision that's right for them. I think that's wrong. And so, Representative Franson, whatever a person believes, whether they think it's a clump of cells or whether they think, like you, that life begins at conception or whatever they think, they should have the right to think that, and they should have the right to act on their beliefs. And if you want to say that, you know, government is too big and government should leave people alone, then just realize that when it comes to this issue that you're being inconsistent on that because you are government. And here you are telling doctors what to tell women, inserting yourself in the private relationship between a doctor and a patient at a moment when she really needs to have her privacy and not have government be there in the ultrasound room.
Member from Washington, Representative Franson, or Representative Lohmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I wasn't going to get up and say anything today, but I did want to address something that Representative Mayquade talked about, and I feel bad for your friend and the loss of her child, but the definition of abortion does not fit with that situation. And so I just wanted to read what the definition of abortion means. So abortion means the use or prescription of any instrument, medicine, drug, or any other substance or device to intentionally terminate the pregnancy of a female known to be pregnant with an intention other than to increase the probability of a live birth, to preserve the life or health of the child after live birth, or to remove a dead fetus. So if your child dies in the womb and you are induced to give birth to that dead fetus, that is not considered an abortion. And I just really wanted to clarify that because I know of women who have lost their babies as well in the womb. And when they have to go through labor and delivery and their baby doesn't have life, it's a very difficult thing. And they never call that an abortion. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Member from Polk, Representative Kiel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is always a difficult conversation, but I think we have to remember we heard things like this is just a medical procedure. Folks, over Easter break, I had a growth taken off my finger. Let me tell you, it's been a pain in the butt on my thumb, but it is nowhere near the discussion of taking a life, and that's what we're talking about here. But more importantly, Representative Whelan's conversation about an ultrasound is just to make sure that that person who is, that woman who is going to seek a medical procedure, an abortion, actually gets all the information that she needs. The doctor didn't take my growth off and just say, oh, well, no big deal, just come on in, we'll slice her off. He explained to me exactly what he was going to do. There was an MRI taken. Did I see it? You bet I did. When I go to the dentist and they're going to do something to my teeth, do they just take a picture and say, oh, we'll do this? No. They show it to you and they say, here's your problem, here's what you need fixed. If you have a knee problem and they do an MRI, they say, look at here, you've got arthritis in your knee, you need some repair. We are just asking that in a facility that provides an abortion, offers to that woman and gives her the ability to see what it is they are looking at, to see what is in that ultrasound. I've been privileged. I'm old enough that ultrasounds were not common when we had children, but I've been privileged to see it 3 times. We've changed a lot in how we look at ultrasounds, but the detail of what we see is so important to everyone. And when I look at an x-ray, whether it is an arthritis or a child that is coming into this world, it is so important to be able to recognize and see what procedure you are having done and how that needs to be handled, and helps you to make that decision when you are looking to make that decision. And folks, I didn't talk to a young gal not long ago that had an abortion, and she told me, had I really asked to see that ultrasound, I would not have had that abortion. She said, I regret that every day. Did she need help? You betcha. She needed some support, absolutely. But she would not have made that choice, and she lives with that every day. Members, I would ask you to reconsider your thoughts on allowing an ultrasound to be, women to be encouraged to see their ultrasounds, and I thank you very much.
Call upon the author of the bill from Anoka, Representative Whelan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for the discussion. I just wanted to make a few clarifying points. First, with regard to the intention of the bill, I know Representative Levy mentioned the concern that we're scaring doctors, but I do want to point out that no action has been made in the 15 years, Women's Right to Know, since it passed in 2003, there's been no action brought forward. So doctors are well aware of this statute and they know how to follow the law, and I have no reason to believe they won't continue to follow the law. And again, the intent is to empower women, and it is actually to help them make up their own mind. To be clear, the reason I said it's not about changing minds is because I'm talking specifically to women who are undecided. So if you're undecided, you're trying to make up your mind. If someone does change their mind, well, great. But this bill for me is focusing on those women who are undecided. Also, with regard to the written testimony that you had passed out to you, the reality that I wanted to show with that is that there are women who have asked to see their ultrasound and they were told no. And while I hope that that doesn't happen nowadays, I hope that doesn't happen in our state. The reality is we have no way of knowing that. We don't know if this is happening or not. And so I think it's important that we make a proactive step to protect women and ensure that they have the information available to them when they're making a very life-altering decision. Members, there's nothing new under the sun. We have in every arena, whether you're a legislator or whether you drive trucks or whether you're a physician or whether you're an astronaut, we have good actors and bad actors. And so I know that there are members in this body who practice medicine, and I think you probably do a phenomenal job. But there are some that may not, and I want to ensure that whatever physician my constituents are seeing in this state are offered the same opportunity to view their active ultrasound image. To me, it is actually insulting to physicians and to women to suggest that asking a simple question would be shaming them. I have study after study here, and I'll just note a few that show women want this. They want to be asked. There's a study here, patient viewing of the ultrasound image prior to abortion, that says many women seeking abortion care want to view their ultrasound image when offered the opportunity. That was the conclusion. Another study, women's perceptions about seeing the ultrasound picture before an abortion, concludes that offering the choice to view is both feasible and beneficial to women. Yet another study shows that when women are asked the question, voluntary viewing may contribute to a small portion of them with medium or low decision certainty continuing to pregnancy. And finally, another study notes that women wanted a choice of whether or not to view the ultrasound because they felt it was their right to decide whether access to this aspect of their personal health information is up to them. And they wanted providers to engage in this discussion with them with respect. And so, members, I really appreciate the conversation on this. And just the final closing points, we've talked a lot about how abortion is a different sort of procedure, and it is a different sort of procedure. In this procedure, we know that there's actually 2 patients, and so we do make other provisions around this. And so I'm going to ask for your yes vote on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Draz. The clerk will close the roll. You coming up? There being 79 ayes and 48 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File
Mr. Speaker?
Next
Mr.
bill on the
Speaker?
calendar, member from Dakota, Representative Wills. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you have being distributed to you right now a resolution. And just wanted to recognize today the Minnesota Zoo is celebrating their 40th birthday this year. And we have the Minnesota Zoo Director, John Frawley, with us today on the House floor. So we're grateful to have him here, and I wanted to just share a couple of comments about the zoo, and then Representative Mayquaid and I will be reading the resolution. So I grew up going to the Minnesota Zoo. My family had a membership, and now that I have children and I have my own family, we go to the zoo pretty regularly. In fact, I actually brought my twins to the zoo when they were only 3 weeks old, while I was technically still on maternity leave, to make sure I could be there for the legislative day last year. So while we may not agree on everything, I hope that we can agree that we all love the Minnesota Zoo. And I wanted to point out 2 events that are coming up. So the Minnesota Zoo, as I said, is celebrating their 40th birthday, and they will be having birthday festivities at the zoo next weekend. That will be on Saturday, May 19th and Sunday, May 20th. So they'll have some extra special activities going on. So I would encourage you to bring your families, share the information with your constituents so they can bring their families as well. And the other event is for us as grown-ups. It's going to be the Beastly Bash on June 9th. You will be receiving invitations very shortly, so make sure you RSVP for that and support the zoo. That is their annual fundraiser. So I will be there and hope to see many of you there as well. And so I'm going to yield to Representative Erin Mayquaid to share some additional comments.
Recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Mayquaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Wills. Members, I also grew up going to the Minnesota Zoo. When you go to school in Apple Valley, they make you walk there every single year, sometimes twice a year, at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. It's a wonderful place. I learned not to be scared of snakes because they made me touch one when I was 6. But I really want to point out that the zoo would not be what it is without the amazing volunteers who volunteer there every year. In 2014 alone, they had 113,857 volunteer hours, and that was just in 1 year. So I'm going to yield back to Representative Wills, but the zoo is really meaningful to not only our community, but our entire state.
Representative Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as you know, with the Minnesota Zoo being a state agency, we support it here at the legislature. And so we want to read the House resolution today. So a House resolution recognizing the Minnesota Zoo's 40th birthday. Whereas the 66th Minnesota legislature voted to establish the Minnesota Zoological Board, which opened the Minnesota Zoological Garden on May 22, 1978. And whereas the Minnesota Zoological Garden, colloquially known as the Minnesota Zoo, is a world-class zoo that connects people, animals, and the natural world to save wildlife through internationally renowned conservation and breeding programs. And whereas the Minnesota Zoo provides an economic boost to the state economy with over $220 million in gross output, supports over 2,000 jobs, and generates $137 million in value-added impacts, and I yield back to Representative Aaron Mayquade.
Representative Mayquade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas the Minnesota Zoo annually serves over 1 million visitors who are attracted to the zoo's 485-acre campus, which provides cutting-edge exhibits housing over 5,300 animals, engaging education programs, and field research and conservation efforts. And whereas the Minnesota Zoo is the state's largest environmental and conservation educator, educating more than 400,000 participants each year with programs such as its highly popular Zoo Camp, and by hosting field trips for more than 70,000 students from more than 1,000 schools from across the state. And whereas the Minnesota Zoo is a respected world leader in conservation, as demonstrated by its significant achievements in tiger conservation, restoring trumpeter swans and bison, and its current projects to save prairie butterflies, freshwater mussels, and turtles. Now, therefore, and I yield back to Representative Wills.
Representative Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Be it resolved by the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration of the House of Representatives of the State of Minnesota that it celebrates the Minnesota Zoo's 40th birthday and recognizes its contributions to conservation and the support it receives from its 190,000 members and the state. And it's signed by Speaker of the House Kurt Doudt, Rules and Legislative Administration Chair Joyce Pepin, myself, State Representative Anna Wills, and State Representative Aaron Mayquade. And to celebrate, members, we have some cookies in the retiring room for you, provided by the Minnesota Zoo. So please join us in celebrating the Minnesota Zoo's 40th birthday.
The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 614. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 614, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health licensing, the second engrossment.
Recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franson, to introduce your bill. Actually, Representative Franson, would you like to insert the House language first? No. Okay. Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, Senate File 614 is a bill that would transition the athletic trainers in Minnesota from registration to licensure. It has been a bill that I've been working on for the last 6 years. The bill does not change the scope of practice for the athletic trainers, and they would remain under the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice. The move from registration to licensure better protects the public, as it will require background checks during the credentialing process. Very important. It also repeals the temporary credential for athletic trainers who have yet not passed the national certification exam. There is no known opposition or fiscal implications. It does not create any new licensing boards, and as I said, the athletic trainers would remain under the Medical Board of Practice. One area to clarify on record is that this bill would not affect coaches who provide taping and first aid in an athletic setting. It does not apply to laypersons who have been certified in first aid or CPR. Such as coaches, so long as coaches are not representing themselves as an athletic trainer. There is no intent in this bill to preclude a coach or other layperson providing the care that they have been trained to provide. Currently, 49 states regulate athletic trainers, and 43 are at the licensure board. Thank you, or licensure level. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 614.
Third reading. Discussion on final passage of Senate File 614. The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Franson yield to
She will yield.
Questions?
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Franson, I don't think you addressed this, but you probably know that I have this question. Does this change the ability of athletic trainers to bill medical assistance or Minnesota Care? And then I will have another question after that one. Thank you.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Representative Liebling, I did intend on addressing that issue in my opening remarks, but then it would leave you with one less question to ask, and I didn't want to do that to you. But no, that does not at all. Thank you.
Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Franson, if she would continue to yield, Mr. Speaker.
She will yield. Representative Liebling.
So, Representative Franson, so you say that it doesn't at all, and I know in the bill there's nothing to that effect, but oftentimes one of the reasons that groups ask to be licensed instead of some other lower level of registration or regulation, and by the way, members, this bill increases regulation. Of course, the group is asking for that. And why do groups often ask to have a higher level of regulation? It's because oftentimes they want to be able to bill public programs and can't, or to bill private insurance for that matter, and can't if they don't have actual licensure. And is that, I'd like if Representative Franson would comment on that. Is it the case in Minnesota right now that athletic trainers, can they bill public programs right now? Will they be able to build public programs after this change is made?
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Liebling. Currently, CMS does not recognize them, and they are not being paid with Medicaid dollars. I cannot predict the future, so I can't comment on that specific topic.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And then finally, Representative Franson, you and I also talked about the fact that the Senate language has an additional piece on it that I don't think was discussed in the House. And I understand that you might want another member to comment on this, but I think that it needs to be pointed out to the members because the bill is not as it went through committee, and we should know what we're voting on. Thank you.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Zerwas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Liebling, yes, the Senate added an amendment dealing with a negotiated deal that had been reached on the language dealing with the Board of Psychology. The language is the result of negotiation with the Board of Psychology and the licensed psychologists. There's no opposition from the board or the community that I'm aware of. The underlying bill, House File 1282, was heard in committee last year and passed, but was not moved forward to the floor for a vote because there was an agreement during the interim and the first part of session. They were able to reach a negotiated deal, but at that point, we were upon deadlines.
Any further discussion on the final passage of Senate File 614? For the final word, the representative from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And like I said, it had been the last 6 years working on this piece of legislation. I would like to thank Amy Brugge, Amy Hamilton, my two constituents who are in the gallery right there waving to us, Michael Doyle and Andrea Allen. They made the trip today to see this bill go through, so I want to thank all of you for your hard work and to my constituents for believing in me and allowing me to do the work for the people back home. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 123 ayes and 4 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2578. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2578, number 7 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to public safety, the second engrossment.
Recognize the member from Washington County, Representative Franke, to introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. If I could, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the amendment first.
There is an amendment to insert the House language. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franke moves to amend Senate File number 2578, the second engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded DEA 3479.
Member from Washington, Representative Franke, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, yeah, exactly as the motion was stated, we are just simply inserting the House language, taking out the Senate language, and sending it back to them when we are finished. So I appreciate your support on this amendment. Thank you.
Discussion on that amendment. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted.
No further amendments.
There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 2578 as amended.
Third reading. Discussion on Senate File 2578 as amended. The member from Washington, Representative Franke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Senate File 2578 is the agency bill for the Board of Pharmacy. We do this every year or so, and usually it's supposed to be a no-brainer, and we just take what the agency refers us to and pass it along. Article 1 is the agency bill, and I will speak to that first. We did have a little hiccup, and I'm sure a lot of you members have gotten emails on this new organic substance called kratom. So I will just speak to this briefly. It was brought forward by the agency to potentially schedule it as a Schedule I drug. We ran into a little opposition and started to do some more research into it myself personally and look at what was actually going on, because I had never heard of this new drug or potential organic supplement called kratom. So as I started to look more into it, you know, I found out some very interesting things. Kratom is an organic supplement that has been listed as an opioid by the FDA. But there are people, I will say that there is the potential here with this drug. It is not regulated. It's available to anybody right now, can go and purchase this organic supplement, which in the brain affects and attacks the same opioid receptors as opioids, but to not the same effect. It is, lower dosages. So I'm just going to read briefly what a statement from the FDA Commissioner Gottlieb says, and it says, "We've learned a tragic lesson from the opioid crisis, that we must pay early attention to the potential for new products to cause addiction, and we must take strong, decisive measures to intervene. From the outset, the FDA must use its authority to protect the public from addictive substances like kratom, both as part of our commitment to stemming the opioid epidemic and preventing another from taking hold." Now, those are some pretty strong words. And since then, the FDA has rolled back some of their opinions on this. And we heard from a lot of people. I specifically talked to several and got several emails. And there are people out there that are currently using this organic supplement, I guess I would say in a responsible manner, to manage pain, to help them through their times so that they don't have to switch to the harsher opioids, so they don't get more hooked and addicted to other stronger drugs. In my personal opinion, do we someday down the road have the potential for misuse and abuse of this organic supplement and ultimately addiction? Possibly, but we don't have the information yet. I will say that people did reach out to me very strongly that use this, like I said, responsibly. So instead of making this a Schedule I, and since the federal the FDA has not decided to pursue that either, what we're going to do in Minnesota and what I'm offering up is to make it illegal to sell to minors and to possess by minors. It's a piece in the valley for right now. I just wanted to bring it to your attention about this potential situation we might have moving forward. I personally believe that this is, a potential gateway drug or a gap drug that helps keep people addicted to other harsher substances. I will add that, this organic supplement, members, is currently Schedule 1 in 5 other states: Florida, Louisiana, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Vermont. It is currently illegal in several other countries, specifically the countries that produce this organic supplement. So not to say that it's not wrought with controversy, but I think at this point in Minnesota, I would ask for your support, just making it unavailable to minors until we get more information on this. And that's where I am at with this part of Article 1 of Senate File 2578. The second article is an amendment that we added on that pertains to a bill that Representative Wills carried. So at this time, I'm going to yield to Representative Wills to explain Article 2 to you.
Member from Dakota, Representative Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So Article 2 and Article 3 of Senate File 2578 is from my bill, House File 2766, to close a loophole in our DWI law. So you probably saw the handout going around that is put together by the DWI task force. And what we're looking at doing here was brought to me by a constituent last fall. So my constituent, Clay Kenthammer, found out, through an unfortunate situation last year, that there was this loophole in our law. So what happened was last year in July, his brother, Adam, and their friends, Brian and Jeremy, were in a car accident, a car crash in Wisconsin, where the driver of the other vehicle had been huffing dust off, which is what you use to clean off your keyboard, and it's not just compressed air. There's an intoxicant in that is called difluoroethane, and it is not currently in our state statute as an intoxicant, as a hazardous substance. And the tragedy was that these individuals died in the car crash. And if that accident had happened in Minnesota, or a similar accident had happened in Minnesota, that individual who had been huffing would not have been able to have been charged under our DWI law. So in October last year, there was a Minnesota Supreme Court case that is the State versus Carson, with a similar situation where the charges were overturned as a DWI conviction because that individual who had been huffing could not be charged. And the court actually said, "We acknowledge that based on our holding today, a driver dangerously intoxicated by DFE, or difluoroethane, is not criminally liable under the plain language of the current DWI statutes." Now, the problem is that our current law relies on the OSHA standard, which is a finite list of substances that are defined as hazardous substances. So working with stakeholders, and especially with the DWI task force on crafting the language, we are changing in the bill hazardous substances to intoxicating substances and replacing the OSHA list with a definition so that when an intoxicating substance is introduced to the human body, it impairs the central nervous system or impairs the human, audio, visual, or mental processes. And the term does not include alcohol or controlled substances, which have their own separate definitions in statute. So we wanted to go this route for several different reasons. Minnesota is one of only 8 states that still relies on the OSHA standard. And the Department of Labor actually submitted a letter of support for our bill because they also believe that we should not be relying on the OSHA standard for our DWI law. And so with that, the changes, you can see it's pretty clear, changing to this definition. And there are several groups in support of this legislation: the Minnesota DWI Task Force, the Minnesota County Attorneys Association, Minnesotans for Safe Driving, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and various law enforcement departments across the state. This is a much needed change in our state law so that individuals who are driving carelessly and intoxicated on the road can be charged with a DWI, and currently they can be only charged with either careless or reckless driving. Being able to have this change and have them charged with a DWI also provides those individuals the opportunity for treatment, which they don't currently have, and those individuals need treatment, they need help. I'm proud to support this legislation and would be happy to answer any questions.
Member from Washington, Representative Franke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, so I want to thank Representative Wills for her hard work on Article 2. I would just like to wrap up by saying, you know, some of this is pretty common sense. We have heard no opposition to either article of this bill, and I appreciate your support. Look forward to you voting green. Any questions? I will definitely yield. Thank you.
Discussion to the bill. Member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Mr. Speaker and members, well, there may not have been any opposition to the bill, and frankly, the part that was just discussed about the DWI and all that, I haven't heard a lot about that. That sounds reasonable to me, but I have some concerns about the first part of the bill, and my concern is that this was not heard in a health committee. In fact, there was a motion to pull the bill, the underlying bill, the Department of Pharmacy bill, out of Health and Human Services reform and send it right to public safety. And I appreciate that Representative Franke is telling us all about kratom, and he's looked it up, and he thinks this and that about it. The problem is that's not how we make our decisions around here. And I'm really troubled because, you know, this is really a problem, because here's a substance that few of us, if any, know much about. Kratom, I guess is how it's pronounced. And what this bill is doing is regulating, it's actually criminalizing it for people under 18, which may be a good thing. It may be a really good thing. The problem is, how do we know that? I mean, presumably the reason we do that is because of the effect on health. And Representative Franke went through a lot of discussion about looking up the effects and all of that. Well, members, when we pass a bill, we don't just go and do some research on Google and then come in here to the chamber and tell everybody what we found. We actually take it to a committee that has subject matter jurisdiction so that the people that look to those committees and follow the bills and have expertise can actually come in and testify in front of the legislators who focus on those issues. And I'm very distressed that that didn't happen in this case. And I don't know, this seems to me to be a very important issue. And again, I don't know, this might be a very good solution. This might be the very best thing we could do. I just don't know that. I just don't know. And that is really distressing. I don't know why the chair of the Health and Human Services Reform Committee didn't insist on hearing the bill. I don't know why other members aren't distressed about this. Maybe they are. But I don't like to make decisions on medical issues, health impact issues, based on somebody's Googling it or my Googling it. That's not how we make decisions. And if we are, maybe we don't need committees at all. So I don't know. I'm probably going to end up voting for the bill because of the other piece that's on here. But I just think this sets a terrible precedent. And here we are actually criminalizing the use of this substance for people under 18, or even the possession of it, or a substance that contains it. We're making that a misdemeanor. And we never even heard anything about the health impact. Nothing. Zero. So that's my comment, members. This is really, I hate to always be talking about process in this body. It seems like I'm the one of the people who always stands up and talks about a terrible process that is going on here. But the reason is because we can't make good decisions with a terrible process. We don't have transparency for the public to come in and tell us when there's something wrong. We don't all get to hear the information. This is really not right. Thank you.
Member from Clay, Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And Representative Liebling, I certainly do appreciate your comments on the process, how this bill moved through the committees. And I just wanted to take a minute to thank Representative Franke on this bill, specifically the work he did on Article 1. We did get a chance to talk about this a little bit, and I have also heard from some constituents on some of the benefits that they've gained from the use of kratom. And so while I think it is important to put some guardrails around this and make sure that we are protecting minors, people under 18, the federal government has not scheduled this substance. And so I think it's important that here in Minnesota we do allow not completely illegalize it in order to allow for more research to be done on this, because I think that's the biggest problem with this substance is that it's new and we just don't have a lot of research on it. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no, or the member from, where's he from? Member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, members, I want to remind you, this is the standard Board of Pharmacy bill that we hear every year. This is the recommendation from the Board of Pharmacies for the statutes involving public safety. This bill was heard. I had a lot of good discussion in the Public Safety Committee about this. The Board of Pharmacy had some concerns with what's going on with this kratom, and they wanted to make sure that they could deal with it. We went through this same type of incident with the K2 and the synthetic marijuanas, causing a lot of trouble. They wanted to get a handle on this before it became a problem, and they came up with a good compromise. They're dealing with this at the federal level at this time, studying it, trying to figure out what's going on, and we want to make sure we protect our kids before they get hurt. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 123 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2554. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2554, number 8 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to public safety, the second engrossment.
Call upon the author of the bill from Washington, Representative Lohmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So society is growing more aware of the horrors of sex trafficking, both abroad, in the United States, and right here in Minnesota. Traffickers deny victims basic human rights and treat victims as commodities to be bought and sold. At the same time, pornography is widely accepted, openly defended, and even celebrated. Many people consider pornography nothing more than entertainment with no thought of the victims on the other side of the screen. In reality, pornography and sex trafficking are inextricably linked. The U.S. pornography industry generates $13 billion each year. Pornography drives demand for sex trafficking by contributing to demand, grooming or training victims, and creating additional revenue streams for traffickers. Pornography is used by traffickers to train victims to perform various sexual acts and situations. Many times, sex trafficking victims are forced to recreate scenes from pornography or are forcibly recorded for pornographic purposes. Traffickers can sell pornographic material of their victims in addition to forcing them into prostitution. This not only gives the traffickers an additional revenue stream, but also attracts new clients. Pornography is harmful to everyone involved, performers, producers, and users. It corrupts their minds and hearts and causes them to break down mentally, physically, and spiritually. Pornography is linked to prostitution and sex trafficking and the commodification of humans. So the bill before you recognizes the link between pornography and human trafficking. It acknowledges the role pornography plays in contributing to a culture that devalues women and girls and promotes men treating women and girls as objects to be purchased, fueling the sex trafficking industry. So the first section of the bill deals with the human trafficking report that the Commissioner of Public Safety publishes every 2 years. And the second section deals with the monetary assessments that would be imposed on crimes associated with human trafficking. So just to be clear, this bill does not make pornography illegal. It doesn't create any new crimes or divert money away from existing programs or entities. There's no opposition to this bill. This bill was passed 67 yeas, 0 nays in the Senate, and Senator Pappas actually spoke in favor of the bill. And hopefully you're being letters are being passed out. You should have a letter from Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, a letter from Breaking Free, and from the organization called Covenant Eyes. So I would really like to thank Representative Pinto for his help and his work on this bill in committee and for his support. And I'd also like to thank the members of the Public Safety Committee, which unanimously supported this as well. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There being no amendments to the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 2554.
Third reading. Discussion. Member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, as I think you're aware of my work outside the legislature as a prosecutor, I served for a couple years as the Director of Statewide Training and Protocol Development for Safe Harbor, which is Minnesota's system for responding to the exploitation of young people especially, though certainly recognizing sex trafficking of all ages. And as Representative Lohmer referred to, had the chance to work with her and with the advocates in putting this together and developing the final language. I want to make sure to emphasize to members and to the public that the factors that underlie trafficking are many. I would put at the top of the list inequities in society, gender inequities, as Representative Lohmer referred to, the sense that women are objects for the pleasure and for men. Racial inequities, I hear incredible stories from the survivors I work with about racist fantasies being acted out, about women of color being devalued in horrific ways. And all sorts of inequities as well, and then those really connect to vulnerabilities of all kinds. There's a 16-year-old girl who I spoke with along with a police sergeant and asked her, what would have made a difference for you to have you not be prostituted, not be sold for sex? And she said, food. Food. I was hungry. This is a way to get food. So I will say, in all honesty, when I would list the factors, pornography might not be at the top of the list, but it absolutely would be on the list. And I guess especially for my progressive friends who may think, well, pornography, no big deal. Sexual violence advocates who I work with say the pornography of the 21st century is extremely violent and degrading. It is warping the minds of young people who are growing into their sexuality in some really awful ways. This is what the advocates who I work with tell me. It really is not the pornography of yesteryear, whatever that was. That this current version is really awful and does contribute to the trafficking of human beings and to the exploitation of human beings as well. So I'm glad to support this bill, and I want to make sure that this is part of a whole set of actions that we take when we pass legislation supporting affordable housing. I want to make sure we recognize that is anti-trafficking work. When we close disparities racially or in gender, that is anti-trafficking work. We make sure that vulnerable young people, vulnerable people are lifted up and their needs are taken care of. That is anti-trafficking work as much as anything else is, and this certainly is as well. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I urge a green vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 1694. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 1694, number 10 on the calendar for the day, the first engrossment, an act relating to the military.
Call upon the author of the bill from Aiken, Representative Lueck, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill would honor General John Vessey on 29 June. That happens to be the general's birthday. General Vessey, the four-star general that was born in Minnesota. But Mr. Speaker, I would like to indulge in a point of personal privilege, if you would.
State your point of personal privilege, Representative Lueck.
Members, Mr. Speaker, in the galley we have family members, we have individuals that served with General Vessey throughout his career, both in Vietnam, Laos, and a great number of places. So let's give these people a hand.
Representative Lueck, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. General Vessey, I say, was born in Minnesota, enlisted in the National Guard at the age of 16, 1939, prior to the start of World War II, obviously. World War II started. He obviously was deployed, served honorably in World War II. There he received a battlefield commission. Went on to serve in the Korean War, Vietnam War, as well as serving as President Reagan's chief of staff, senior military officer at that time. And a lot of folks don't realize it, but when President Reagan brought us to the end of the Cold War, one of his most trusted advisors and the wisest men that surrounded him was General John Vessey. So he served for 46 years, one of the very longest military officers to serve in the United States Army. He's got numerous decorations from Purple Heart all the way Distinguished Cross, Navy, Air Force, Defense Distinguished Service Medals. After his retirement, President George H.W. Bush awarded General Vessey the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1992. So members, are there other individuals that will probably wish to speak? But with that, I would certainly urge a green vote.
There are no amendments to the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 1694.
Third reading. Discussion of the bill. The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. What a proud day it is for the state of Minnesota to be able to honor one of its own, General John Vessey. As Representative Lueck had pointed out, General Vessey has a long distinguished military career. And in September 30th of 1985, when General Vessey, after 46 years of being in the United States Army, retired, and you'll see many because that's the end of the fiscal for the federal government. He left and went into civilian life, but he also stayed connected to the military. And although I had never personally met General Vessey, I can tell you that I've always known who General Vessey was and the work that he did on behalf of a very grateful nation. And one of the things that General Vessey has said that has always stuck with me, and that is he would tell people, my job is to give the President and the Secretary of Defense advice before they know that they need that advice. Just think about that. What a dedicated leader who would go out for the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense and bring information before they knew that they needed that information to help them to prepare and to understand. Again, as I said, I never really knew General Vessey, but I was very honored to be able to be at Camp Ripley in August of 2016 for the final public memorial service for General Vessey, surrounded by members of our Minnesota National Guard, and was even more honored to be able to be seated right behind the Vessey family. As Jack Morris, the longtime chaplain for the Minnesota National Guard, gave some wonderful words on behalf of the work that General Vessey did. General Vessey is interred at the State Cemetery in Little Falls. And if you ever get the chance when you're going through Little Falls, take the exit, go to the State Cemetery, pay tribute to General Vessey and to all of the others from our military who are interned there as we thank them for our freedom. Members, please vote yes. Again, Representative Lueck, thank you for bringing this bill forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lueck. General Vessey is a treasure to the state and to this country. His service was unwavering, and it's just really nice that we can do this today for him and for his family and friends. So I urge a green vote.
Member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. In addition to the honors that have been given today, I'd also like to recognize the work that happened a while after he was done with the military, and that was General Vessey Academy, which was in West St. Paul, and I had the opportunity to give a commencement speech there once. And so the work, in talking with General Vessey, the work that was done there with folks, many of them who were at-risk students who went to that school, and it's a living memory to General Vessey, the opportunity that those students had and the work they did there. So Representative Lueck, this is a great bill, and I look forward to voting yes.
Member from Stearns, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I strongly urge support of this, and I will say that if you have any interest, you should go up to Camp Ripley and go in the Ed Center. They have a display of General Vessey's uniform, some of his awards. Very unique, a write-up. I strongly urge you to take a trip up to Little Falls and up to Camp Ripley and take a look at that display. I strongly urge support. Thank you.
Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Omar votes aye. There being 126 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, the final bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 3793. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File 3793, number 11 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to local government, the first engrossment.
Call upon the member from Carver, Representative Pugh, to explain her bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, the bill before us today is designed to increase the amount of business counties award to locally owned small businesses, including veteran-owned, women-owned, and minority-owned companies. The House companion to this bill, House File 3608, was brought to me by Hennepin County and passed the Government Operations Committee earlier this session. Members, the Senate amended my bill to make it available to all counties, not just Hennepin. The bill simply raises the threshold for doing direct bid contracts from $100,000 to $250,000 if a county uses SB
SMEs, or small business enterprises, or veteran-owned companies to do the work. In 2016, I authored a bill that gave Hennepin County authority to use job order contracting for construction projects. That program has been very effective and has distributed work to a broader range of locally owned companies, instead of just a handful of the large contractors. Senate File 3793 is the next step in Hennepin County's effort to give more county construction contracts to small businesses, veteran women, and minority-owned. The county has found that the most effective way to include small businesses in its construction projects is by unbundling portions of larger projects into smaller scopes of work. For example, bidding out the electrical, plumbing, painting, and HVAC components separately. The unbundled portions then are offered to contractors who bid on that work. Today, Hennepin County can only do this if the unbundled portion of the project is $100,000. However, most of Hennepin County's projects are in the $1 million to $5 million range, and so based on that size, it's very infrequent and difficult to find a divisible scope of business that falls in that range of $100,000. And so that was the impetus for increasing the threshold from $100,000 to $250,000. It's a great bill. Small businesses are a documented, well documented source of new job creation, and increasing this cap is going to continue to increase opportunities throughout the state of Minnesota for our small businesses. The Association of Minnesota Counties is supportive. The Association of General Contractors is supportive, and the Associated Builders and Contractors are neutral on the bill. And again, it did pass the Senate unanimously. And I would stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 3793.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Without objection, we will revert to messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file. Herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File number 3265, an act relating to human services. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman. Kresha moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File number 3265, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Kresha does move that the House refuses to concur in the Senate amendments on House File 3265, and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House. Thank you.
Representative Bennett, is that your motion?
That is my motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Announcement by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 3265, Kresha, Bennett, and Halverson.
Motions and resolutions. There's a copy of the non-controversial motions and resolutions at each member's desk. Without objection, we'll take action on those first. Hearing no objection, so moved.
Introduction of House Resolution Number 7, a House resolution celebrating the month of May as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. The resolution is being introduced by Representative Lee and others. It's being referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Lueck moves that House Law Number 3567, now on the general calendar for the day, be referred to the Committee on Commerce and Regulatory Reform.
Representative Lueck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that House File 3567 be re-referred back to the Commerce Committee. We've got some policy language that we would like to get done before we bring it back to the floor for final vote.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Announcements. Announcements. Member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is May 11th, 2018. It is Child Care Provider Appreciation Day. The definition of a child care provider, it's a noun, which means chef, baker, gender, sock and shoe finder, grocery shopper, dishwasher, nose wiper, vegetable pusher, storyteller, playground attendant, PE teacher, activity director, aerobics instructor, entertainer, therapist, bookkeeper, self-esteem builder, teacher, problem solver, engineer, safety instructor, arbitrator, inventor, musician, athlete, beautician, artist, accountant, supervisor, author, and those are some of the names that child care providers go by as they own their own business. So as you go out in the public tomorrow, when you see a child care provider, or if you know one, please thank them for the amazing job that they are doing. As you know, this career is under attack. And we need to make sure that we can build up that profession so that our youngest kids have a safe place to go to while their parents are at work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members.
Announcements, members. Member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, members, the Conference Committee on Senate File 3656, the supplemental appropriation bill, will be convening in room 1200 of the Senate office building. It'll be, I don't recall if the Senate is still in session now or not, but it'll be either in 15 minutes after we close here or 15 minutes after the Senate adjourns.
Announcements. Majority Leader Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Monday, May 14th, 2018.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourn today, it adjourn until 10 a.m. Monday, May 14th, 2018. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until Monday, May 14th, 2018 at 10 a.m.